7.4998 trillion. And the original number was 7.5 trillion. And like I mentioned earlier, this is a huge number. So it's also a huge number to be off by. On the screen right now is a representation of how far they were off by. Again, I'm sure the mods did their best, but when talking about someone's character and their image, making mistakes as big as this can be really damaging. After coming to an estimate of a new probability, the expert said this, quote, "Even in the worst case, the probabilities are not so extreme as to rule out any chance that Dream used the unmodified probabilities." The expert also said, quote, "If you ask, what is the probability that anyone playing Minecraft has luck as good as Dream did during these 11 streams, then the odds are very high. Dream's luck can be described not in terms of unusual success in the game, but that out of all of the Minecraft players, it was him who got this lucky, and he got this lucky while live streaming. But remember, this could not be counted against him, because he was investigated precisely because he got very lucky." I actually ran a survey where I gave 100 random people 2 options on what the number they talked about meant. Option 1, the odds of a top 1000 speedrunner on video or stream getting the luck that I got, or option 2, the odds of anyone doing piglin trades in Minecraft getting the luck that I got. Every single person out of the 100 said option 2. They, and probably you watching this based on the survey, figured that the mods presented the odds of this happening to anyone while trading with piglins. They didn't think that this was the odds of this happening to someone while speedrunning, being a top 1000 speedrunner on stream or video. As a good example, pick a number between 1 and 10. Go ahead, right now, pause, pick a number between 1 and 10. You had a 10% chance of picking the number 7 just then. Now, out of the millions of people watching this, there's probably quite a lot of you that picked that number, but there may only be a few thousand that are recording but also picked the number 7. And there may even be fewer of you that were doing a reaction to this or were live and also picked the number 7. That doesn't change the odds of you picking the number 7, it's still about 10%, but the odds of you being live and picking the number 7, now we're talking about 0.0001% or somewhere around there. Now, you can see why it might be misleading to say streamer had 0.0001% of getting this lucky, even though it's technically true. But it doesn't change the fact that you had a 10% chance of getting that number regardless of if you were streaming or not. In the words of the professor that wrote the document, quote, "Extremely low probability events happen at random all the time. If you consider, for example, every Minecraft player, then a perfect run, 2 out of 2 Ender Pearl trades and 7 out of 7 Blaze Rod drops, probably occurs multiple times an hour. Considering all Minecraft worlds ever played and the multitude of ways in which luck plays a role, even 1 in a trillion events happen daily." But that's not even getting into their actual math, that's just about how they presented it. The first thing that's wrong is that they did not correctly account for trade stopping. Basically, when you trade with a piglin, you trade until you reach enough Ender Pearls to then leave and go to the stronghold. When you get enough Ender Pearls, you immediately stop trading and leave other uncompleted trades. This is a quote from the expert's report. Quote, "If the last barter in a sequence is always an Ender Pearl, because then the speedrunner leaves, then it simply cannot be claimed that all barters are fully independent and identical. Without identical independent barters, the binomial model is inappropriate." In order to prove that the trade stopping was important, the expert ran a simulation over 1,000,000 times that shows that his model is far more accurate to how trading actually works than the model used in the report. Quote, "The barter stopping simulation does indeed show that there are fewer barters required to get the desired number of Ender Pearls if you end immediately after an Ender Pearl barter. It also helps explain why charts showing Dream's bartering outcomes seem unbalanced with respect to Ender Pearls. They don't account for the fact that Ender Pearls are special because they are the goal of bartering. Accounting for this problem makes the odds extremely more likely." The expert says that, quote, "This model has objectively a higher fidelity and thus a more accurate estimate of Dream's odds." However, another thing that's been used against me is that when comparing this lucky streak to Illumina or another popular runner, my streak of runs looks much luckier than, say, a streak of lucky runs they had. Again, here's another quote from the document from the expert. Quote, "The low probability of Dream's runs and that Dream performed much better than other speedrunners should not be considered as independent pieces of evidence. They both indicate the same thing. Any lucky speedrunner chosen because they look lucky will look lucky when compared to other speedrunners. Not to mention that a lot of speedrunners run constantly offline, including a lot of the top 5 times, and these runs are verified despite not being able to look into their RNG at all. Another thing that the mods got wrong were a few of the bias corrections. The mods claimed that they biased everything in my favor and that the number they came up with was the lowest possible probability in my favor. One thing that they mentioned in their investigation is that they came up with the number 10 for the number of potential targets for a cheater to change. They also said that this was a generous exaggeration as they could only think of a few. This confused me, so I asked them for a list. When I asked for the list of the 10 that they were referring to, they were unable to provide one, and they inferred that it was arbitrarily chosen. So I decided to come up with a list myself of all the possible targets that a cheater would try and cheat in speedrunning that have similar importance to blaze rods. I was able to come up with a detailed list of 37 different RNG targets that I believed were very comparable to blaze rods. I shared this list with a few speedrunning experts, including Illumina and Benix, and they seemed to agree that the 37 I listed were fair, and incredibly more accurate than the random number 10 that there was before. This was actually a recurring theme throughout the document. They would say a number and claim that the number was the most favorable number possible for me, and then use it in calculations, and then when me, other runners, or the expert would look into it, it would turn out that the number that they claimed was the best possible number in my favor was so far from it that it usually was actually the worst possible number against me. Another example of this is that they claimed that the formula they used would find the lowest possible odds in my favor, but the expert tested their formula on their own example of coin flips and found that their lower bound, or what they claimed to be the lowest possible odds in my favor, were actually twice as high as the actual odds of a coin flip streak, meaning the formula they used was extremely flawed against me, and it only gets more flawed when talking about lower probabilities. In the report, the expert says, quote, "The claim that the p-values given in the MST report are as favorable as possible is not supported by our investigation." The biggest problem that I have with this is that the way that the mods document was written and presented in the video made me look as guilty as possible, while also putting into the watcher's mind that not only are these numbers right, but they are the best possible scenario for me. Even the numbers that the expert came up with are not the best possible scenario for me, and they are already way less than what the mods put. Obviously, the way that they phrased it makes me look really guilty, and it was something that they didn't even need to do because the numbers looked bad already. One thing that he says at the beginning that I think is notable in his report is that he says, quote, "Probability calculations are hard. There may not be one right way to do something. It is easy to violate some hidden or unknown assumption." What I take away from this is that when talking about a series of events and trying to calculate the probability of them happening, it's really complicated, and different methods are constantly debated in statistics. And that's the reason why a lot of times statistics are thrown out in actual court, because they can be misleading and lead to false convictions off of faulty statistics, even on accident. Probability is extremely complicated, and there are tens of thousands of things that you have to take into account when coming up with an accurate representation of probability, especially on a non-random sample. Although the analysis done by the expert shows that the odds are much lower than the odds of the mods presented, this was done in about a week, and I'm sure that there's a lot of other ways that the data can be interpreted and corrected to make it even more accurate. The expert even mentioned at the end of the document that there are possible corrections that can be applied that would reasonably bring the number down to 1 in a million or even lower. As much as I would love to debate math and statistics for the next 2 years, I'd rather just say, hey, here's what an expert said, take it as you will. On top of everything I've said so far, numbers can be really misleading. As an example, when you create a Minecraft world, that world has a random number created with it, the seed. That random number determines how your Minecraft world looks. That means that each different Minecraft world you've created had a 1 in 281 trillion chance of being that world. It gets even crazier when you start to combine the odds together. If you created 2 Minecraft worlds, the odds of you getting the first world and then the second world are so low that you cannot even calculate them on 99% of calculators. Yet, you obviously did get those 2 worlds in a row. No one can tell you otherwise. But again, that's misleading. But it's still true. Each individual seed has no significant importance, and you are going to get a Minecraft world no matter what. So it's actually not that significant, but the way that I phrased it made it seem significant because of how rare it is. Another different way that odds can be misleading is with the lottery. The odds of you winning the lottery may be 1 in 100 million, but with 100 million people buying lottery tickets, someone probably won. And surprisingly, there's actually far more players that play Minecraft than that play the lottery. You can compare this directly to Minecraft speedrunning, because with 100 million people playing Minecraft, tens of millions of people doing millions of piglin trades, someone will be the luckiest player in Minecraft, and someone will be the unluckiest player in Minecraft. Might be you, who knows? But the chances are that there are probably thousands of players that have experienced 1 in 100 million or more piglin trading luck without even realizing it. So now that we've established that numbers can be misleading and talked about where the mods went wrong with their analysis according to a statistical expert, I want to move a little bit off the numbers. Let's talk a little bit about the video. In Geosquare's video, he says this.
We asked Dream for his mods folder specifically so we could check for any modification, but he was unable to provide any evidence since he says he deletes the contents of his mods folder pretty regularly.
That obviously makes me seem very suspicious, except for the fact that I didn't ever say that. I provided the mods with every file they ever asked for, and I never said that I regularly